Woo.
Thanks for sharing, Randy.
I don't know if you've ever done this before, but coming up here and just taking a second to take it in, yeah, it's pretty cool. My name's Randy Groen. I'm a drug addict and alcoholic.
Hey, Randy.
And I am clean and sober today because I like the effects produced by Cocaine Anonymous. I drank and used for a really long time because I like the effects of drugs and alcohol. I would not be here today if I hadn't found that sufficient substitute. And that sufficient substitute for me is Cocaine Anonymous. It was funny. I'm going to tell on you, honey. The pep talk I got before I came up here tonight, she said, "How can you have such a deep voice and be such a pussy?" And, with all the love in the world. But I am. I have a deep voice, and I am absolutely. I am passionate about recovery, and I am king of the Phoenix Criers Club because I have welcomed emotion into my life since I got clean and sober. So I don't make any excuses about that either. Thank you for having me. I want to thank the committee. Every single one of you have played a small part in getting me here. It's been a beautiful experience since I've been here. Cocaine Anonymous is alive and well. My road into these rooms, you know what? Anybody not know how to fuck it up? Okay. So I did that too. There's a whole lot of things about my story that might be a little bit different than yours when it comes to the actual people, places, things, examples, this, whatever, da-da-da. But we came in with the same kind of stuff. At some point in time, we realized the gig was up. And we could break it down in the book, and we can do all this stuff, but at some point in time, the gig was up. I can tell you it didn't start like that. I've always been amazed at listening to speakers when they go, "I took my first drink when I was 12 years old and 6 months and 4 days, and it was August 24th, and the sun was shining." I don't know when I had my first drink. I don't know when I took my first hit. It wasn't something I thought I needed to remember to tell somebody later. You know, I got high when I got high. I drank when I drank. My first sponsor was a kid named Danny. We were probably around 12 or 13, and we were out at a picnic out on a farm. I grew up in northwest Iowa in the middle of nowhere. And I went around the side of the barn, and Danny was sitting there with a couple of long neck Budweisers. I was like, "Where'd you get that?" He said, "Right over there by that cooler." And I wanted what Danny had. I was willing to do whatever Danny told me to do to get what Danny had. And I did exactly what Danny told me to do and got exactly what Danny told me to go get. And it's odd that my entire life, either drinking or using or playing ball or athletics or this or that, I took direction. And if I really wanted something, I followed that direction to get what I wanted. So why at the age of 35, when somebody said you might want to get a sponsor to teach you how to stay clean and sober, I'm like, yeah, fucking, I don't know about taking that. I've done such a good job with my life up to now, kind of thing. So I've always had this idea behind sponsorship. It existed from the very beginning. It was really fun for a long time. I got fucking flashbacks going. I come from an acid generation. I got little fucking blue things running around my fucking ceiling when I'm looking around. I'm like, whoa. Fuck yeah. I'm home. Didn't think they'd come and get me in the middle of a talk, but let's go. But by the time I got out of high school, I thought I'd done pretty much everything I knew of. You know, we checked the boxes. I've done cocaine, and I've done acid, and I've done speed, and I've done heroin, and I've done, you know. So, but it was all just weekend warrior stuff. I went to college on an athletic scholarship. I was supposed to play baseball, and I left my arm on a mound during spring training. And back in the 1970s, there was no such thing as Tommy John surgery, and when you blow it out, you're done. And the dream was gone. Similar to the story that we heard the other night, and last night, and both speakers last night killed it, by the way. I spent 4 years in college. I have enough credits to be a second-term sophomore. I went to 3 universities. I got kicked out of all 3 universities for non-participation. My calculus professor called my mom and my parents halfway through the year and said he wasn't sure if he had ever met me. I like managing discos. You know, I'm that old. In the 70s, that's what it was. And you show up and you deal. And you do whatever you do to have a good time. And you live at the dorm for free. So college was okay. I moved to Dallas, Texas because a buddy of mine had made the Dallas Cowboys football team in 1981. I tell people that I spent 3.5 years in Dallas, and I remember about 2 weekends. In the early 80s in Dallas, Texas, it was a thing. It was on the back end of the White House, though we did spend some time there. But when you run around with a professional athlete, it's all limousines and big rooms and VIP rooms and I'm the white kid that's running around in a very, very different circle. And they had all the money. But I knew where to get all the stuff they could spend their money on. So I lived that world. And it used to be a world with lots of money. Remember how it used to work? Wads, cash, wads of this and that, and then it gets down to the point where you kind of like you just start breaking even. It's to the point where you just kind of start using cheaper. And then it's to the point where you're sitting in a chair with a gun to your head because you don't have the money or the dope to pay back the last front. I took that road. And I burnt it all up. And in a matter of 3 years, I went from the VIP rooms to living in a cardboard box behind a Circle K in Plano, Texas. The Circle K, and then there was a Kentucky Fried Chicken, and then there was a pool hall called Clicks. And I would crawl out of that box in the morning, and I'm that guy that walks down the street losing an argument with himself. You know, you can't drive around the tough parts of any of your cities and not see that guy walking the sidewalk losing the argument with himself. And I was that guy. I was that delusional guy. And try to figure out how to get into that 9-ball tournament or try to hustle some pool long enough or get you hooked up with you and take a little bit. And you know how you do that game, you know, just try to get by. And if I didn't eat, I'd hand pick up the garbage in the parking lot of that Kentucky Fried Chicken, and the manager would slide some food out the back door for me. And I'd crawl in that box again. And when you're in that box, you don't know whether you want to wake up. It's not about wanting to die. It's about not knowing whether you want to wake up. Because I'm educated. I'm a smart kid. I've done this. I got parents that love me. I've got this. How did I, like he said last night, and I just was like, fuck yeah, how did I get here again? How did this liquid, how did this pill, how did this powder kick my ass again today? It did it every single time. And I don't know what bottoms are. I don't, controversial or not, I don't believe in the word. The book tells me that if I continue to drink or use, it's always going to continue to get worse. So I never hit a bottom. In fact, the day I got clean and sober was a way better day than a whole bunch of other ones I had in my life. My last day drinking and using was not the worst day of my life. My parents had endured for me for about a year and a half, and they had hired a private detective, and with the help of that detective and some folks, they chased down some of the ball players and some of my friends and found the general area in Plano that they thought I might be, and they found me, and they gave me plane ticket back to Iowa. Took me another 2 weeks to use that ticket. Anybody else get that feeling that, okay, here's your opportunity. Here's your plane ticket back to safety. Here's your plane ticket back to those people that love you. Here's your plane ticket out of the box. And you're like, yeah, not yet. I appreciate all your help and stuff. Not yet. Because all I got to do is get you hooked up with you, and I'm going to take a little bit off of that, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to, then we're going to flip this, and I'm going to get my car back, and then we're going to. But I eventually took that plane ticket and went back to Iowa. Convinced him everything was fine. Went back to Dallas, Texas, because that's what we do. We convince everybody's fine. I get a knock on the door. Distribution of acid, cocaine, and speed. 4 felonies. Take the 1, plead out to 3. Now I'm back in Iowa again. Walk into a bar. There's this lady behind the bar. She's new to town. We have a party at that house, my house that night. It goes nuts, like it always does. I convince her that we both need to get the hell out of Dodge because her and her 2 kids and myself are going to build this beautiful world together, and we need to go do it in Phoenix, Arizona. So we went to Phoenix and we set up shop. She bartended and I dealt until she got caught stealing or I got caught dealing. One of those 2 things always happens. And you go down the street to the next little bar, the next little club and whatever until she gets caught stealing or I get caught dealing. But it kept continuing to progress. I'm a drug addict and alcoholic. Maybe the best way to explain it for me anyway was my parents used to say shit like, Randy, you just can't fucking drink and do drugs anymore. I'm like, I know. I know. Look at the packet. You know how if you go to the county jail or whatever, they can run your name and what the NCIS, have big A, B, C, D, E, F, G report, whatever the fuck they call it. And And it's got all the shit that you've ever done, you know, and it's this packet, and it's just, here are all of the fucking, look at the evidence. You can't drink and use. No. Until I came into these rooms, I realized, I never realized until I came into these rooms that it's not because I can't. It's because I'm gonna. I'm a drug addict and alcoholic because I'm gonna drink and use. Thanksgiving, Christmas, anything important, kids' birthdays, trying to get home. Because I'm the disappearing guy. Because we set up this shop, and the two boys ran like feral animals in the backyard, and one of us thought the other one was always there, which sometimes neither one of us were. And I'll take off on Sunday morning to go to the store to grab some milk. And I'll see Jerry's car across the street. He's at the sports bar, and the football game hasn't started yet, but I'm going to just say hi to Jerry real quick before I go home. And then I call my wife on Wednesday from Las Vegas. And I'm like, weren't you worried about me? She's like, no, Leanne, which was Jerry's wife. Leanne and I have just been watching you guys on the credit. We've been watching the credit cards, so we knew that you guys were okay because the credit card kept binging for $300 or $400 every few hours. I'm that guy. I can't be trusted. I'm Jekyll and Hyde. Because there were days where I came home and I would take those kids to the backyard and I'd be that human jungle gym. And we would have fun, and we would wrestle, and people would laugh because everything was dialed in that day. And there were days I came home and I wasn't. I am an angry, violent man when I don't get my way in life. And though I've never fisted up and hit anybody in my life, in my family, inside of my family, all of those people in my life have hit the wall. They've hit the furniture. And they've done so coming from midair. And I'm not proud of that. But I would lie to you if I didn't tell you that I am fully aware of who I am and what I can be when I'm drinking and using. It got crazy. Everybody else in a relationship with the drinking and using kind of got even worse than the two of you could imagine. So now I'm drinking over here and she's drinking over here. I'm using over here. She's using over there. We've got separate dealers because we don't know what the other one. We don't want the other one to know how much we're using. And you know, I mean, it just completely off the rails. So I had this great idea because I have a penis. Somebody in my family needed to get their shit together to take care of these kids. So I took my wife kicking and screaming and committed her as the drug addict at a rehab center. Yeah. They took her. Because I was like this when you met me. You signed up for this. This is our role. Remember gender roles? Well, that's fucking stupid shit. And it was crazy. And you know how when you know it's crazy, but you can't even admit it to yourself, how crazy? So strangely enough, I came into these rooms through what we would call the back door. Because this treatment center had a meeting on Wednesday night for the family members and significant others of those across the hall, the drug addicts across the hall. And I would go to those meetings drinking vodka because somebody told me you can't smell vodka. You guys all know, when you drink like we do, you can smell vodka. In fact, this 5-day-old vodka coming out of my pores kind of shit. And for whatever reason, it could have been going to jail for all the DUIs that I didn't have time to tell you about, for all of the public intoxications, for all of the assaults on police officers, for all the shit none of us have the time to actually tell you about on our way in here. On June 1st of 1993, I asked this counselor if he would take a couple minutes after the meeting, and I said, I think I might have problem with drugs and alcohol. And this asshole looked me right in the eye, and he said, I know. Everybody in the meeting knows. Your wife knows. Your kids know. Anybody you've ever worked for knows. Your family members know. Your neighbors know. The guy at the convenience store knows. I was like, what a dick. But he did something for me in this encounter that has meant so much to me in the world of Cocaine Anonymous, and the way that I go about sharing the message and working with newcomers, is that he did two things. He told me the truth, and he gave me a hug. He told me the truth, and he gave me a hug. He said, Randy, you're going to have to find the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. You're going to have to find meetings and a fellowship of people that have the same stories as you. You're going to have to go to those meetings until you can get hooked up with an individual that you believe has a basic knowledge of that 12-step program. Ask him to take you through the steps. Go through those steps like your life depends on it, because it does. Create a relationship with God and teach yourself how to teach somebody else, how to teach somebody else, how to teach somebody else. And if you do that every single day, as sick as you are, you got a shot. And at that point in time, that's all I fucking wanted, was just a shot. I just want a shot. Because it had been so long since I felt like I had one. So I started showing up, and thank God, Cocaine Anonymous was strong and well in Phoenix, Arizona in 1993. When I say strong, and we had maybe 10 or 12 meetings a week, but there was a meeting every day. And I started to show up at these meetings. You know how the newcomers, I would show up late. I would sit in that Dare to Be Sober row in the back. And as soon as you circled to pray, I took off out of the room. Because I want to go complain to my wife that nobody reached out to me. It's a clique. But the fact is, I was scared. At 35 years old, I was scared. I was scared of lots of things. But truly, for you, of you, what the hell is my life going to be like if I get clean and sober? If I'm not the guy with the dope, if I'm not the guy that can drink a fifth of Jack Daniels and still drive everybody home, if I'm not the guy, what am I going to do if you erase all that out of my perception of myself? And what am I going to do about all of these feelings? Because it gets raw. In the first 60 days of my sobriety, I white-knuckled it. Nicotine, caffeine, tears, anger, resentment, confusion, God's grace. I think God's grace is here when we get here. And I don't know how long it sticks around for everybody, but it's stuck around long enough for me. And it sticks around long enough until you do something to turn God's grace into the gift. And when God's grace turns into the gift of recovery, magic happens. I was about 60 days sober, and this lady named Melissa came up to me, and she said, we're going to go out to coffee after the meeting. I was like, fuck, it was, ugh. So I roll out with these folks. But by now, something had happened. By now, I had seen that you guys all had, like, cheeks. I never ran around with anybody drinking and using that had cheeks. You know, we're all just sucked up and thinking we're cut. We're just dying. You know. And you guys drove the same, you drove cars that were the same color all the way around. I never had a car that was the same color all the way around. You know, you get that accident, you grab the quarter panel from somebody, I promise to paint that bitch someday. You know, you smoke up the rest and it's okay, it's fine. It kind of looks good. But I saw some things in you. So eventually I said yes, and at 60 days sober, I went to this little coffee. Still, it was like, ugh. And she said, have you got a sponsor? And I said, nope. She said, why not? And I said, I haven't found anybody I consider to be an intellectual equal. And I'm not about to take direction for my life unless I think I find somebody smarter than me. I can tell you I've shared that story around the world and almost never do that without somebody coming up and going, I think like that. Why would I? Why would I take direction from somebody if I don't think you're smarter than I am? So being smart's got nothing to do with this. I know a lot of dumb motherfuckers that have been sober for a really long time. I happen to be one of them. She said, why don't you go down to the end of the table and go tell Doug what you just told me? And I took my little 60-day sober butt down to the end of the table and I said, hi, Doug, I'm new in the fellowship and I don't have a sponsor because I haven't found anybody I consider to be an intellectual equal. And I'm not about to take. And you know when you're in Cocaine Anonymous and you find that perfect kid to sponsor? You know what I mean? And as a sponsor, I mean, his eyes went to... He had landed himself the whale. And he said, here's my number. Why don't you call me every day? Tell me what page you're on in the big book. And we'll talk about some of these ideas that you have. I'm always afraid to talk about my trip through the steps because sometimes there's somebody out here going, my sponsor didn't do that, or whatever. I can tell you I had an experience with the steps. And it was from the book. My sponsor did not sit down and read the book with me, as some do. He said, it tells me that I'm supposed to, if you want to see me, I'm going to give you a copy of the book and I'm going to ask you to read it through. And if you want to see me again, we're going to get busy. And I stay in touch with him and I made these phone calls as I read through the book. Every day I would call him up on page 32. And then I would call him and say, I'm on page 34 when I'm still on 32. And we would start having some of these conversations. And I called him one of those days with that newcomer not yet having worked the steps pitch. You know, yeah, it sounds like Charlie Brown's mom. Wah, wah, or the teacher. Wah, 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 wah. Yeah, that. My life, my wife, my kids, my dog, my job, my yard, my wah, 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 wah. And he said, I need you to put down the phone, get out your big book, read the chapter called Into Thinking, and call me right back. I said, okay. I am a newcomer that has not yet worked the steps. I figure it takes about an hour to read a chapter. I watch television for an hour and call that motherfucker back. And I said, thank you very much for that direction. There's a lot of really good stuff in that chapter. He said, Randy, there is no chapter called Into Thinking. He said, that chapter's called Into Action, and it's about time that you get into it. And my sponsor showed me that day that he doesn't give a shit about what I think. He cares about my recovery. And he told me the truth, and he gave me a hug. And I went through the steps. Step 1, I'm fucked. Step 2, there's a God. I'm not it. Step 3, I'm going to turn my will and my life over to this newfound higher power. My will are my thoughts, so I turn my thoughts over by writing down an inventory in step 4 of my fears, the bullshit, the stuff in between my ears that keeps me sick. I share them in step 5 with someone because he's the only sane one in the conversation. I believe the garbage I wrote down. I need his assistance to show me what my character defects are in 6, willing to do something about 7. Now I got to do something about my life. And I made that list, and I went out and knocked on those doors and told people that I'm the reason they don't have a TV anymore. And I sat down with my parents, and I told them that I knew what I had done. And we spent 6 hours going through all of this in this tearful reunion of our lives. And I was also taught to ask somebody at the end of that, is there anything else that I'm not aware of? And my dad looked me in the eye and he said, son, you done missed the mark. He said, for 1.5 years, we didn't know whether you were alive or dead. And as your mom cries herself to sleep every night, coming back and telling us that you're going to pay us back for some of that school money, missed the mark. It was beautiful. Now I start doing some stuff on a daily basis that connects me with this power, and I start standing up and I start recognizing all of a sudden, instead of praying like whoever, whatever, if you're there, help me stay sober, I'm using words like God. Dear God. And I learned how to get quiet. And I thank God every single day that my sponsor took me through the steps with what we call intent. As we started the steps, he told me, he said, there's a lot of people in this program that will take these 12 steps and they will change their life for the better. And they will have beautiful families and live beautiful lives, and off of the world they go. And if you come in here and steal from this program to have a beautiful life, you're as selfish and self-centered as the day that you came in the door. He took me through the steps to teach the teacher, to teach the teacher, to teach the teacher, to teach the teacher, to teach the teacher. He never let me forget it any time we were doing this. So as you're writing that inventory, what would you think if somebody told you this? Or what would you think if, how would you get to that guy that's having trouble recognizing that we always talked about what it was like to do my experience and continue to help somebody else have theirs? He encouraged me to do the steps with as many people as I can. And I have done the 12 steps with a number of different folks in groups, different settings. You know, the Joe Hawk stuff, I want as many experiences that I can get with the 12 steps so that when I share my experience with a newcomer, I have as many different arrows in my pocket that I can use to help them have their best experience. To teach them how to teach them how to teach them. And the 12 steps work perfectly, 1 through 12. And in the last 31 years, I can tell you that the steps work backwards perfectly as well. Because in the last 31 years, I have gotten to a point where I am no longer interested in taking your fucking phone call again. I don't want to go tonight. I'm tired. He never fucking listens. They don't appreciate me. All that stuff between my ears that makes 12-step work and usually when that happens, it's because I'm not praying and meditating on a daily basis anymore. I'm starting to miss some stuff. I'm starting to miss some stuff because there's a little daily inventory thing that, quite frankly, if I was really honest about, I probably got a little bit of amends stuff to go on because I've got some eighth stepped up. I don't really want to write that down because, my character defects are quite fine. Every once in a while, a good old-fashioned justified resentment feels pretty fucking good. And I'm not going to share that with my sponsor in step 5 because, you know what? Outside of a fucking hit, nothing is stronger than a good old-fashioned justified resentment. We love that shit. That good old-fashioned, fuck you. That's a rush just saying it, I get that today. Clean and sober. All the way to the point where maybe, I've been sober a long time. Do I really have to turn all my will in my life over? Can't I drive for a while? All the way back to fucked. I've taken that relapse trip. But if there's anything that I've done consistently in this program is I've made myself available to the circle of people that I have in my tribe. And you have caught me before that relapse turned into another hit. I've got the phone call. Hey, you were dropping so many F-bombs the other night at the meeting. Are you okay? Those are friends. The friends that will not let you go to the cliff and not let you know that you're close to the cliff. Well, Joey's okay. He's just a little squirrely right now, but he's been around a long time. He'll figure it out. No, Joey might not. My friends are not afraid to have the uncomfortable conversation. Some of them are uncomfortable. Because being loved is uncomfortable. Loving someone enough to keep them from jumping is uncomfortable. And I go to way too many funerals. I go to way too many funerals. I sponsored a kid for 14 years, and he was just the keynote speaker at a recovery-based conference out in the East Coast 3 weeks ago on a Saturday night, talking about how great recovery is and what it's like to put together the marketing programs for the recovery. I mean, he was a superstar. And fentanyl got him on Sunday night before he left the hotel. Tired of going to funerals because everybody's okay when we're not. The beauty of this is that it happens every single day here. I said yes a lot when I got here. Chris mentioned that I have a current service commitment that it's a big one. No smaller, no bigger than anybody else's. It's an important one to me, and it's an important one to the Cocaine Anonymous. The only reason that happened is that I just continued to say yes. A lot. 15 years ago, I was on the World Service Board of Trustees, and as the business side of Cocaine Anonymous is that it says the word incorporated, and it's a business, and we got to sign some papers every once in a while that make us feel really weird about signing them, legal documents and shit. And they don't know what board of directors and 12-step fucking trustees are and shit. So, but I ended up having to sign this piece of paper that said Cocaine Anonymous president, because I was the chair of the trustees at the time. And I called my sponsor. I was like, dude, I just signed a piece of paper that said I'm president of fucking Cocaine Anonymous. He's like, that's fucking awesome, Randy. East Valley Men's Group, your home group back here in Phoenix, is having trouble with the cigarette butts out in the parking lot of the church. And since you're one of the smokers out of our group, I nominated you to head up our cigarette butt committee, and you get to stick around. You get to stick around and clean up all the cigarette butts after everybody drives out of the parking lot every night for the next 6 months. Touche. And I was taught that we don't have any big shots here. That you say yes to service, and yes to service is yes to service. And it was as important enough to pick up the cigarette butts to make sure that meeting existed as it was to be the World Service Board of Trustees or the current World Service Office Board Chair to make sure you get your chips and lit. Every one of those kept the doors open for Cocaine Anonymous. I don't know where I'm at time-wise. I get fucking... All right. I'm going to tell you a story about the fellowship as well. I was a year and a half sober, and my wife got pregnant. And we thought this was amazing because, remember now, she just got out of treatment, and she hasn't since stayed sober, and there's all another. But at a year and a half sober, we're both clean and sober, and we are Mr. and Mrs. fucking CA. We are sponsoring motherfuckers. We are in the shit. We're da-da-da. It's on like Donkey Kong. And she gets pregnant, and we are going to have this beautiful, sober baby. And at 6 months into this pregnancy, we get a phone call. By now, I got a job, which is weird. But I got a call at work, and I needed to go to the hospital. There was something wrong. And off I went to the hospital. And I walked in this fucking hospital, and they sent me into this room. And as I walked into the room, and they put on this gown in one of those, like, TV ways, like you think you're the one doing surgery, where you just walk in and your arms are in the gown, and it was kind of like, the guy looked up and he goes, "Is that the father?" And they said, "Yes, it is." And he went, and he opened my wife from one side to the other. And they did this emergency C-section, and they pulled this small, full of fluid, gray and chalky little boy. And they rushed him off into the corner. And I'm standing above my wife, and we're so new, and it's so scary, and it's so crazy, and you could tell her eyes are like, they do the epidural thing, and so she's like, "Well, what up?" And I was like, I can't tell her it's okay. He was diagnosed with non-immune eye drops. He was given a 5% chance that he would live, and a 99% chance that if he did live, that he would have severe difficulties in his life for as long as he might live. And I went nuts. Because you all told me that I was going to believe in this God that was going to change my life. And I bought it. I bought it for over a year. And look what he did to me. And I was so angry. I called my sponsor, and he said, just let the fellowship come and hold you for a bit. And people came over to our house, and they set up this schedule, and people came and watched our kids because we're at neonatal intensive care every day. He's plugged into everything. And they mowed my lawn, and they watched my kids, and they did this, and they did that, and I couldn't break it. I couldn't break. And I said, Doug, I don't know what to do. And he said, you need to go to a meeting and tell people how you feel. And I'm like, that's not a good idea. He said, yeah, it is. And I went to this meeting called Torchlight. It used to be at 10:30 at night. We used to sit outside. Arizona's beautiful at night. Our meetings used to be outside around these tiki torches. And it was this outdoor meeting. And in the middle of the meeting, I just cracked. I don't know who's sharing. I don't know what they're sharing about. But I stood up and I told you all you were full of shit. Cocaine Anonymous is a bunch of sheep. It's a cult. It's not true. I can't remember a single thing I've ever thought negative about Cocaine Anonymous that didn't come flying out of my mouth in that split second. Literally interrupted that meeting and dumped. They stopped the meeting. And they created this hug line, this fucking overwhelming just line of people that told me that they love me and told me to keep coming back. I can assure you that I was pretty clear that I never wanted to see any of you ever again. And you want me to come back tomorrow? Because that's what unconditional love is. That's what Cocaine Anonymous is. And we started to pray, and every couple of months, we did this for 4.5 months in neonatal intensive care, and you would come in, and they can't be on the machines any longer, so the priest that works at the church is there, and or works at the hospital, and then the doctors, and everybody says what we're going to say, and they shut off a machine, and you just sit there and wait, and he would make it. And a few weeks later, we'd go back, and we'd all say what we're going to say, and we're all going to do this, and we'd shut off the machine, and we'd make it. And he'd make it again. Benjamin's 30 years old. He's got head, yeah. Good job, God. He might be in the fast lane into these rooms. He loves his music going, I'm like, we are two different species. But the miracle of that situation was that I didn't get clean. I didn't go get high over something out of my control, and I learned how to trust a God again. Last story, I promise. 3 years sober. I told this earlier. Somebody told me not to forget to tell it again. My great-grand sponsor was an AA guy, but he loved Cocaine Anonymous. He loved the idea of the inclusiveness of our fellowship. In fact, he told me once, he said, I think Cocaine Anonymous is the greatest 12-step program in the world because it's the only one that's already in place for the drug that they have not yet invented. The next spice. The next this, the next fentanyl, the next mind-altering substances. We are already in place for it. Bring it. And I showed up one night at the men's meeting where my great-grand sponsor used to go. And he looked at me and he's like, what are you doing here? Because he's an AA guy. And I thought, like I told somebody earlier, I thought that I had, had the right answer. You know how you want the right answer for your great-grand sponsor? I'm like, well, I like going to the mothership and, hanging out with you guys for the experience of blah, blah, blah. And he said, Randy, Alcoholics Anonymous already has a whole bunch of you. Cocaine Anonymous doesn't. You have an understanding of the recovery process. You understand how to take people through the steps, to teach them how to take people through the steps. You're willing to be of service. And the book says that you're supposed to be of maximum service to God and your fellows. So get your ass into Cocaine Anonymous and stay there. And I did. And Cocaine Anonymous has been my home for almost 32 years now. You always know when a speaker's almost done because they say stuff like, and if you're new, so if you're new, I would like to tell you the truth and I'd like to give you that hug. Find a room of people that have the same stories as you. I don't care what fellowship it is, but find yours. Where you fit. Find a copy of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous and find someone with a working knowledge of that book that will take you through the steps in a manner that your life depends on it, because it does, to create a relationship with God that will keep you clean and sober every single day that you try. And the more you help others, the more your life will explode, as is mine. And I'll pass with that. Thanks.